Okay, everybody, welcome. Is this on? Can you hear me? Hello. Okay, welcome. Final HC 360 presentations. You are all wonderful. It has been a joy to have you as students. I think we've all learned a lot together this semester. So we are going to dive in first to our group presentations, starting with the Challenger expedition, then Endurance expedition, and then the X expedition, and then go into some individual reflections on leadership. And David and Elliot, do you have anything to add?
Well, normally just to repeat what Professor Whitaker said, which is to thank all of you for the time and attention that you've given to this whole project, and that it's been a ton of fun as we've watched it all develop.
And I just hope that, I think we've had a pretty good time, and I just hope you guys have had a good time, and I do hope you guys have learned a lot. I mean, this is definitely a different way to do a class, so I hope it was worthwhile and you guys are able to take some stuff and move forward. So.
Great. All right, without further ado, let's bring up the Challenger expedition group. Take it away.
Good to go?
Take it away.
Folks, it is our privilege tonight to share with you not only one of the most crucial stories in the world of oceanography, but also quite the valuable lesson in terms of leadership and how you work with that, especially within a team. This is the Challenger expedition. We start our story in 1868 in England. It starts off with Charles Wyville Thomson, a naturalist from Ireland at the time, and he was meeting with William Benjamin Carpenter, another naturalist from the area, to talk about crinoids. Now, they wanted to be able to experience that and really be able to work with that in the deep ocean to disprove some misconceptions about the topic and to also just to get more experience with that. So they commissioned the Royal Society that they were a part of and the Admiralty of England to give them a ship, the HMS Lightning, to work with. And for the August of 1868, they were able to travel around the North Atlantic, just southwest of the Faroe Islands, and really be able to study their craft. Now, this gave Thomson the idea, what if this was taken worldwide? What if we could study these creatures, and perhaps ones we didn't even know existed, all around the world for years to come? And so he proposed an idea. And this comes from his conviction that those novelties of extraordinary interest at the bottom of the sea could be shared by everyone. And so he set out for that goal of exploring the world on the HMS Challenger with colleagues from the Royal Society and a hand-picked team of other naturalists, and they departed on December 21st, 1872. Their first leg of the journey involved what's called the shakedown. Basically, this was where they worked out their processes and figured out how they operate as a team. This took them some time because, unlike other expeditions before them, this was the first time where really mariners and naturalists were working so intertwined with each other. There are comments from Sub-Lieutenant of the Challenger, George Campbell, about some of those growing pains in there, especially when it comes to the enthusiasm of it. He thought it was funny to see all of the naturalists getting excited over a bunch of dirt and some crabs coming out of the dredges in places like, Gibraltar Strait, places like that. So they took this time to figure it out and went through all of these processes. And this wasn't a linear process either. This was something that was cyclical, much like in terms of scientific inquiry. You're not always going to be done answering that question. There's always time to revisit it later. So much in the same sense, they were continuously improving their processes in terms of equipment, practices, things like that, while also improving themselves as team and as people.
So when they got to the mid-Atlantic, their main focus was on sediment and dredging. And this is where you really saw a kind of loss of morale, because they kept, from the dredges, kept picking up just the same stuff over and over, a lot of sediment and dirt. And so they were getting pretty discouraged. But when they kept pushing on, they actually, once they got into kind of the thick of it, they ended up discovering the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So that kind of just shows that, and that is pretty much an underwater mountain range. And that shows, which is a huge discovery to make. So once they reached the ridge, they started finding red sediment, which was kind of confusing to them. But overall, it was clear that if they didn't push on and let the morale drag them down, that they wouldn't have made that amazing discovery that is still obviously renowned today. So, yeah.
All right. So after the Mid-Atlantic, they go to St. Paul's Rocks, which is now currently a part of Brazil. And so they make observations of local seabirds and crabs, but I want to focus more on leadership roles seen. This is primarily seen through one of the major scientists, Henry Moseley. He volunteers himself, starting at this point in St. Paul's Rocks, to fill in the knowledge gaps of the crew in their research mission. Now, Moseley had background as in archaeology, anthropology, zoology, and natural sciences, but he volunteered to be a botanist wherever they found vegetation onward in the research. Now, to me, this showcased that he was dedicated to the research taking place on this vessel and that he was enthusiastic about it. Specifically, we found records that stated that while he had his own interests in the research on the vessel, he was willing to take on more roles to help get as much information as possible to bring back to England. And this is also backed by all the other scientists on board. They, like Haley mentioned, they kept bringing up the same organisms, especially when they were doing dredges all around the same spot, but they maintained their enthusiasm for picking up different specimens for their collections. And overall, I think this displays that if your crew knows the goal and they're passionate about it, it will get done to the greatest potential it can. Following that, they go to Inaccessible Island, where they meet these two German seal hunters that were stranded there 2 years prior due to their vessel catching fire. Now, the Challenger hears out their story when they visit the island, and this story kind of demonstrates that in leadership, especially for any goal, you should assess your resources, make a plan, or maybe even make a strategy on how you're going to go about that plan. So what the Challenger crew finds out is that the two brothers, especially early on when they were stranded, they didn't have the best of luck setting up shelter or having the best resources once they abandoned their vessel. This island had all sorts of mountains, all sorts of challenging terrain. They tried to make grass huts near the mountains so that they could have access to mountain goats for food, but they learned that their grass huts catch on fire easily and that it's hard to scale the mountains to catch the mountain goats. So this was their failed attempt. But eventually, they found this waterfall on the island, and that gave them access to fresh water. They finally had a successful hut. And then they found these penguins, shown here. And they ate the penguin eggs, and they used the penguins as for their downy feathers to help provide them warmth when they needed. And overall, this shows that you should probably assess your resources to have a more successful and more effective way of survival in the two German seal hunters' case.
So the Challenger, The Challenger sailed through the Southern Ocean while scientists collected sediments and took copious amount of notes on icebergs. However, they did not reach Antarctica, and that was not their goal. Both the scientists and the ship's officers came to an agreement that it would be foolish to attempt sailing further south in an unfortified ship. This decision shows a sense of responsibility and accountability seen throughout the expedition. Members of both parties were staying within reason, and hence the Challenger expedition was relatively unscathed, likely due to careful planning and calculated decision-making. Tense moments in the Southern Ocean were thanks to those glimmering icebergs, as one displayed here. Beautiful in sunlight, they were perilous in low visibility, and especially at nighttime. In one instance, they collided with an iceberg, and their jib was sheared off. Despite harsh conditions and intense storms, the sailors got the ship through, and the scientists continued their sampling. And that example of the iceberg collision would be a case of mission-critical leadership, having to act quickly and maintain control within the situation. And since the Challenger was able to depart the Southern Ocean safely, they were successful in recognizing threats and recovering from them. The trawls and dredgings in this region provided the first information on the biological makeup of this region, shedding new light on life in high latitudes. Additionally, scientific findings in the Southern Ocean, both of icebergs and sediments, are some of our first samples gleaning information into the paleoclimatological record of the Earth. It turns out that their persistence to continue dredging, despite seeming to be monotonous, proved to be well worth the trouble.
Sorry. The Challenger crew then made their way over to Tonga, and this is where they started to compare everything that they found that the natives did to what they did in Europe. So immediately, everyone in Tonga was considered, all the natives were uncivilized, and I kind of compared this to early American history with the Native Americans in here in America when Columbus first came over, and we see this all throughout history, so it's not just these two examples, but immediately when they arrive, they start calling them uncivilized, and it's like their godly duty to civilize them. So that type of leadership back then was considered accepted and was very well known, but obviously now that would be ridiculous and wouldn't fly. So that was just something that we noticed throughout the story, was that this type of leadership was just not, that was kind of a failed type of leadership story that we found throughout this.
Like Haley said, they also tried characterizing the natives like they did all of the other species that they had found in this expedition. Like, they tried to figure out a way that, like, they were either descendants from them or they were just, like, a whole species different than they were, which, I mean, now we know that we're all people, but back then, like, this would have been their way of thinking. And to try to further understand this, they socialized with the Tongan chiefs over kava, which was like their traditional drink, and they would really just try to understand the people. One of the members of the Challenger crew had actually learned the languages of these different people and had tried to figure out all of the similarities between all of the natives that they met here in Tonga and elsewhere, and compared it to the ones that, I mean, he already knew back in England, which I feel like was also a good leadership role. Like, he was trying to understand the world in that aspect and not just the science aspect of things. Yeah. All right.
So while the Challenger expedition did not stop at Christmas Island, it holds a significance to one of the expedition scientists, John Murray. While analyzing coral samples back in Scotland, he was missing a sample from Christmas Island and requested if a naval ship in the region could retrieve some. Upon receiving the sample, Murray found that it was nearly pure phosphate, a key ingredient in fertilizer, making it very valuable. With the help of George Campbell, an officer aboard the Challenger, and the son of the Duke of Argyll, Britain annexed the island, and Murray was able to set up a phosphate mine. Prior to beginning the mining, Murray arranged for the natural history of the island to be surveyed in order to establish a baseline. This was the conscientious scientist within Murray to begin a record prior to the drastic changes which may have occurred due to the commencement of mining. Britain annexed the island in 1888, and by 1912 it was estimated that at least 1 million tons of phosphate had been extracted. The revenue that the government earned from the phosphate, which was just 5% of sales, was estimated to have easily covered the cost of the Challenger expedition. Murray became very wealthy, and he used his funds to establish a marine laboratory in Scotland, as well as supported numerous other scientific explorations and expeditions. Ironically enough, the ecological damage done to this island due to the mining resulted in an institution dedicated to working for healthy oceans. Overall, Murray's curiosity, connections, persistence, and external motivation enabled the success of this operation.
And so, unfortunately, en route to Tahiti, there was an unfortunate incident where the German scientist von Willemos unfortunately dies, and this is very significant for the Challenger due to how well respected he was on the ship. As a result of this, it was very difficult for a lot of people to really figure out where to take the scientist aspect next on the voyage, just due to how he was able to resolve a lot of the conflicts within the ship. And so because of this, there was a very big lesson learned on this in understanding the hierarchy within the ship. And so on top of this, the issue of him leaving, unfortunately, due to his passing, was very significant overall. And then as well, in the Southern Ocean, they reached the Cabbages, otherwise known as the Kerguelen Island. And this is very significant due to the resources that were provided on this island. In this region, there was a lot of the Kerguelen, also known as cabbage, that was very edible for a lot of people. And while the higher-ups on the ship weren't really keen on eating this just due to its taste and texture, it was very important for the crew to be eating this just because in comparison to the Kerguelen, their other food was either rotten, it was spoiled, it was stale. And so this kind of decision-making for the crew in comparison to the more captains and the higher-up scientists, it really shows a conflict between the two and just showing the class difference between them. And on top of this, it also really shows a disconnection, and this kind of disconnection really affects an emphasis on the way that everything was laid out on the ship.
After 3 years, they end up back in England. And this part, I'm just going to go over like what happened after the expedition was over, because even though it was over, it had a lot of impacts after that. This year is actually the 150-year anniversary of the Challenger departure. So just to give that a perspective, they were all doing all of this scientific research 150 years ago, and just how far science has come. From this, the Challenger Society also formed in England and is still active today. They still meet with scientists around the world and just discuss new evolutions in science and where they want to go. And along this way, we keep mentioning that they found new species and they were trying to characterize them, but they found 4,700 new species just in the 3-year span of them just going around the world, which I feel like is a pretty big number. And definitely a huge contribution towards the future. But they still use these samples today to compare specimens from back then to what they are today, just to track like extinction rates or climate change. And so we're still learning lessons from the Challenger even today. Many things have been named after the Challenger as well. I mean, NASA even named one of their Apollo missions after the Challenger just because it was almost what they're trying to do just in space. It was another unknown at the time, kind of like these scientists went out into the ocean and figured it out. So we're still learning from this crew 150 years ago. Any questions? Yeah. Mhm. Yep.
So,
Haley, can you repeat the question, please?
yes, so Brooke asked, is this on? I'm having troubles with this. Okay, so Brooke's question was the Navy vessel that retrieved the phosphate also trained for collecting scientific samples? And I'd say the technical answer is no, but that this was just like another vessel that was within that region, and because Murray had connections from the Challenger with different personnel in the Navy, he could ask, can someone in this region collect some samples for us? So.
Yes.
Just so that there are some people tuning in online.
Hello, Jenny. Can you hear me? Okay. The island that you were referring to, the or inaccessible island, I don't know if I just missed it, but was it called that before they got there, or where did the name come from?
That's the thing. They kind of, at least in the book that we read and through primary literature that we had looked at, it was just called that. That's just what they called it. I guess part of it, like some background with that as well. The vessel itself, I know the Navy crew, like it might be called that because it is a rougher seas out there. One of the things the Navy crew did, or at least advised the scientists, was to be within an hour reach of the vessel. So if weather kicked up or if conditions got even rougher, they could return and get out. Because around islands, it's kind of hard to avoid weather conditions compared to larger land masses.
Roxy?
Jenny, you were just talking about the Navy and the scientists working together. Do you feel that there were any discrepancies when they were working together? Because sometimes they cannot take criticism from the other side. So scientists can have a hard time taking it from other people, and the Navy could have had a hard time taking it from the scientists. Do you think that there was any room for that in this expedition, or what do you think they did well or what they didn't do well working together in this specific expedition?
Yeah, and I'm just going to repeat the question, although I might summarize it, but I want to make sure I got everything. So you're asking if the Navy personnel and the scientists, were there any conflicts? How did they deal with that? Now, I know that Mosley and other scientists were kind of bummed out that they could only be within an hour's reach, because throughout the story, the scientists are super excited to explore anywhere that they stop. And I know an earlier example, while not in the sections that I talked about, one of the, like in the shakedown, they're pulling up sediment onto the decks. Like this is the prime example we've discussed in class. It's mucking up the decks. And so the Navy personnel are like, what the heck, you're mucking up our decks. But they come to a compromise and try to like designate a section of their deck where they can just muck it up, or they make special platforms for them to do the discovery. So they kind of make compromises along the way. Sure, things weren't perfect, but overall, it was sort of painted like in the end that they did well overall with conflict management.
I just wanted to add to that as well. The whole science versus Navy thing, that wasn't a black and white issue. There's records of one of the assistants, I believe of the quartermaster, Joseph Matkin, who was incredibly invested in what the naturalists were doing and wanted to learn more about it, even though he didn't really necessarily know what was going on. So I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't really a universal thing, and there were people getting along on both sides. as well. There were those times, for example, during the shakedown, when the sentiments kind of bubbled up and those conflicts had to be resolved.
Next up, we've got the endurance group. Let me get you all queued up here. Don't. I think you guys are gonna have to.
Okay, cool.
Click it. Unless you know how to.
I don't. I only know how to do it on PowerPoint.
Okay. Same.
Oh, awesome. Which one is this?
Imagine you open your eyes.
You have to move the mouse by going to the right, and then you'll be able to advance the slides. All good?
I think so.
Take it away.
Okay. All right. Hi, guys. We are the Endurance Crew, and we've made a podcast for you. I think by the end of this, you'll be able to tell that this was our first try at making podcasts. So we had a little bit of fun with it. I hope you have fun listening to it. And if you have any questions, just make sure you ask us at the end. All right. Without further ado, you ready?
I just want to give a big thank you to the beginning for Captain Rappaport for helping us out along the way. And throughout our podcast, you'll be listening to some sounds. So Professor Whitaker and her synthesizer also helped us out. So this is a big creative process, and our group spent a lot of work on this. So without further ado,
Imagine you open your eyes and you're surrounded by ice. The Arctic wind whips across your face. You are numb to the cold. Imagine your stomach growling, pained by the constant hunger from the lack of seal meat. Today, the boss has ordered that we shoot the dogs.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the South Pole Podcast. My name is Molly McGinnis, and let's just dive into the story of the Endurance. Shackleton made an expedition to the South Pole, but he was just shy of reaching the geographic South Pole. He came back to Europe a hero and traveled around sharing his story. The Arctic called to him. He planned another expedition back to the pole. The Endurance was built in Norway, and the crew was hand-selected by Shackleton. The dogs were brought in from Canada. They propelled well in advance for this expedition to cross the Antarctic by foot. This was their goal. They sailed down from England in the midst of a world war. After reaching the Arctic, the Endurance was trapped in ice. Her and her crew spent grueling months waiting, trying to free her from the pack ice. In the end, Shackleton made the tough call to abandon ship. A short time later, she sank, and they became prisoners of the ice. Their new goal was one of survival. Shackleton and a total of 27 men now had to escape the Antarctic and the Weddell Sea. they had to make it to Elephant Island. Along the way, they had to make critical decisions in order to survive. They had to hunt seals and penguins and eat them. And at a critical point, they had to shoot their sled dogs as well. These men painstakingly dragged their lifeboats across the ice and sailed them to Elephant Island through multiple attempts. After the 3 lifeboats arrived on Elephant Island, they sailed away and they found the vessel with the English-owned Southern Sky in order to rescue the rest of the men left behind on Elephant Island. They failed, and they had to stop 100 miles short due to the ice. Eventually, Shackleton convinced the Chilean authorities to loan them the vessel Yeko, a small steamer, which they set sail with Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean for Elephant Island. Triumphantly, they rescued these men, camped out on Elephant Island for months. Rescued and alive, all 27 men survived to sail another day.
Now we're going to hear from Phoebe, Mackie, and Ben.
So that was a long, grueling trip that wouldn't have been accomplished without Shackleton as their leader. The trip should have ended in tragedy, however, everyone made it back alive. There are definitely plenty of hardships, so what roles do you guys think that leadership and strategy played throughout Shackleton's voyage?
Great question. I think Shackleton used his interpersonal skills to cultivate himself as a natural figure of inspiration and soul throughout the worst parts of the expedition. Through his awareness of troublesome members, audience at group activities, and poise in moments of detriment, he was able to establish himself not only as a leader, but as the heart of adventure for the other members of the crew.
Yeah, Ben, I think what you were trying to say is that Shackleton certainly was the star of the show when it came to keeping morale throughout their expedition, including often sacrificing his own personal space by keeping the mischievous and selfish crew members in his own tent once the Endurance sank. This is a powerful example of leadership and strategy due to the strength needed to take on that during such a hard time.
That sounds similar to what he did at the end of the voyage as well, when they left Elephant Island headed towards the whaling outpost to call for rescue. Not only was this a strong example of leadership, it also shows clever strategy that these members of the crew now thought of themselves as important and conducted themselves differently than before.
It sounds like we're all on the same wavelength there. This kind of makes me wonder, why do we think his leadership style worked for this voyage? The 3 of us took the DISC profile test for Shackleton, so we know that he has dominant and conscientious characteristics, but if he had a different leadership style, like an analyst or an architect, do you think he still would have succeeded?
I believe that if he had an analyst-architect leadership style, he may not have been as successful. He had to be stern and a little more headstrong, and have a get-it-done attitude. I feel that the analyst-architect leaders may be a little more quiet and reserved. He didn't always have time to think before he made decisions, especially when it came to speaking up and telling his crew what needed to be done. Although he definitely showed some analyst-architect characteristics, such as his extensive planning, I believe that with the given situation and the crew at hand, the dominant, conscientious leadership style was crucial. Phoebe, what do you think?
Well, Mackie, personally, I have a supportive, relationship-focused leadership characteristics, where I often find myself trying to balance out the group, but sometimes I fall short when becoming overly trusting of others. So I think if Shackleton had followed this leadership style more dominantly than his DC characteristics, then it may not have gone as well. For instance, Shackleton may have focused too much on the feelings of the crew and less on how to direct them through survival, as the cost of comforts and familiarity was lost on the ice. I agree that having the dominant, conscientious leadership style was important for the success of this expedition, but Shackleton likely included some supportive characteristics as needed to keep morale high.
Hey, do you guys think that there was conflict on the Endurance when there was a crew of 30 people living on a small ship in less than ideal living conditions?
Oh yeah, I'd wager that they did have some tussles. I wonder what happened when they switched from a safe ship to terrible tents, living in a constant state of mortal danger.
There was probably some conflict then, too. You know what word comes to mind?
Not sure. Is it awful?
Not that. It's VOMP.
Ah, VOMP. Voice, ownership, empathy, and plan.
Great. Now here's Sam and Dave with the next section of our podcast.
This is David Kudrow and Samuel Hoff, and we'll be talking about what we have discovered after reading Endurance and studying about Shackleton's expedition. So, Sam, what are some of the themes that we spoke about in class?
Well, in the beginning of class, we spoke about strategy, problem solving, thinking outside the box, and we learned about our leadership styles. Towards the end of the course, we learned about different leadership techniques and how to react in high-risk, short-duration situations. Following this, we talked about conflict resolution. All of these themes can easily be identified throughout Shackleton's expedition.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. What are some of the events in the book where Shackleton showed these leadership techniques?
One of the key techniques that Shackleton used in the beginning was to create a fair environment between all of the crew and himself. He did this by making sure they all had the same supplies and living conditions. These acts by Shackleton were what shaped the extreme respect for him and his decisions. A crew member even wrote, "When all hope is lost, turn, kneel, and pray for Shackleton." His leadership style turned him into the glue that held them all together, and trust was a major foundation of this. David, what do you think about the trust level between this group?
Well, I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink, a retired Navy SEAL, and he has some very good points on humbleness and trustworthiness. In one of his podcasts, he stated that trust is not blindly given. It must be built over time. Comparing this to Shackleton's expedition, he had a very similar leadership style from what I noticed. Shackleton built his trust from others by having plenty of prior expeditions and serving in the Royal Navy with high ranks for about a decade. On October 27th of 1915, Shackleton ordered to abandon ship. Everyone listened and trusted him at that moment. This level of trust is developed only by a few people in very limited situations. Each crew member trusted him with their lives.
Yeah, I agree with that. That brings in how we spoke about high stakes, short duration situations in class. In these cases, there can often be a constantly changing environment. In Shackleton's case, it wasn't always a short duration, but the situation was constantly changing. He had to be able to make decisions and remake decisions to fit his environment. With the ice and weather being a major factor in his changing situation daily, he needed to constantly be changing his plan. One false step would have resulted in complete loss. In his log, he wrote, "I pray I can get the party home safely." And he did. His high-stakes leadership ability saved every person on this expedition.
Yeah, those are very good points, Sam. To tie this all together, clearly, I could see that conflict resolution was a major leadership theme throughout the expedition. After assessing the situation, Shackleton orders the crew to go to sea in 3 lifeboats, the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. After 7 grueling days, they land safely on Elephant Island. Then, Shackleton announces that he will attempt to sail the 22.5-foot James Caird 800 miles to South Georgia with 5 others. This was the key part for me that shows what Shackleton was willing to do in order to save not only his life, but the rest of the crew.
Now that we've talked about conflict on the Endurance, let's vomp?
Vomp.
Vomp.
Anyways, what do you guys think are some lessons that can be taken away from this expedition?
Well, I think we know now that leadership style can totally affect the morale of the individuals in a group.
We also know that the crew was completely isolated from the outside world. The only source of morale boost that they had was from Shackleton. If he didn't stay positive and confident, the whole group would have fallen apart.
Yeah, he really had to be a confident leader in order to maintain the group's resolve, which ties back into his strengths we discussed earlier and why this expedition remained successful through the hardships. Speaking of ships, when the Endurance sank, the crew lost their comfort and familiarity of being sheltered from the harsh Antarctic environment. I think that is another lesson to be taken away from this expedition.
Yeah, Phoebe, I would say that their survival prioritized their life over the comfort they found on the Endurance, if you could call it that.
It must have been pretty unbearable for those months that they lived on the ice. Not only were their physical living conditions horrendous, but they also had to live with the mental stress of being perpetually brushing off death.
Not chill at all.
So now that we've covered a lot of the happenings on the expedition the Endurance crew unwittingly set on, I'd say that there was no way they could have known what they were getting themselves into.
There was so little known about the Antarctic at the time, but even today I think that we can still embark on trips and expect the unexpected.
That's a good point. I know a few weeks earlier this semester, I set out on my expeditions to collect a Brobdingnagian quantity of sand dollars for my senior research. I needed to plan for what I know, but also what I did not know. For example, I went snorkeling this semester to collect my sand dollars because I had to plan around the tides, and the only extreme low tides this semester were at 2 a.m. So it was a matter of convincing either somebody to wake up that early to collect them with me, or rather convince someone to just snorkel and collect sand dollars on a normal afternoon. That is how I planned for some of my expeditions.
On a similar topic of snorkeling, Phoebe and I have both been lead divers during some of our diving trips. This means that we have to plan out the dives and discuss with our group not only the plan, but the potential hazards of the site as well, and where we'll keep safety equipment for how to deal with those potential hazards should they arise. During the dive, we will have to ensure that the dive is going smoothly and that everything is going mostly to plan. After the dive, we'll hold a debrief and make sure that everyone came up with enough air reserve, takes care of their equipment, and fills out their dive logs.
Yeah, guys, I know a lot about that stuff too. Anyways, let's bring it back to Molly to tie everything together.
Our group is just a small part in telling the story of the Endurance. The journey did not end after Shackleton ordered to abandon ship and the Endurance sank. Almost 100 years later, another expedition was conducted and the Endurance was found. The story of Shackleton and these 27 men continue to be told today. His leadership lives on with the story. What kind of leader are you? Would you go down with the ship, or would you rise above the ice?
Thank you, everyone. That is our presentation. Any questions?
Yeah, so just as a reminder, especially for the audience at home, what are the DISC leadership personalities and what do they offer us?
Yeah, so the DISC personalities are, so it's kind of like an online 10 question, well, there's a bunch of different variations, but the one we took is that it's an online test that kind of asks how you would react to certain situations, and you'll either kind of fall more towards focusing on relationships, focusing more on kind of being more direct and taking action, being more of like an analyst and kind of thinking through things more, and then there's, or being cautious. So it's kind of a mix of all those things, and how they all combine differently is how we all have our different personalities.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Other questions?
Were there any children on the expedition? I just noticed in one of the slides there was a really small person, and I was wondering if it was a kid.
So, no, there were no kids on this expedition, but actually there was one stowaway that ended up being a part of the crew because they didn't realize he was there until they were really off going on their way. And once they left Europe, they did not stop until they were at the ice, really, until they did stop on a couple islands when they were, almost in Antarctica. But at that point, they weren't going to just let him off and be like, here you go, you can go here. So he ended up being actually a big part of the crew, and everyone survived, including him. So he ended up actually making a huge difference because really all of them did in that expedition.
Did that guy plan on being there? Did he do that on purpose, or did he just
Yes.
fall asleep
Yep,
there?
it was on purpose. Him and one other member of the actual crew ended up getting him inside the boat. He hid in underneath the boat for correct me if I'm wrong, about 2 to 3 days before he actually showed his face. He waited until it was long enough until they were like, well, he's on the boat now and he's not going anywhere. So, yes, it was a carefully crafted plan.
I'll also say, like, when this ad was put out to go to the Arctic, you got to think about, like, these guys weren't making a lot of money, but there were like hundreds of thousands of applicants, and each single one of the crew, minus the stowaway, was hand selected by Shackleton, and he could judge character really well, even just with talking with somebody under 5 minutes. He like met them and be like, okay, you're it or you're not. So it's very like decisive leadership making abilities.
Thank you. A round of applause for Endurance Group. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to our final group presentation, the X Expedition, WILX Expedition.
Oh yeah, right, does it? Oh, this is so futuristic. Oh, it's up there. Then we just have to What if we bring it? Will that show up sometime? Yeah, like that. And then it shows up. It's at the beginning. All right. We should introduce it, right? That's not right. Can you exit out of that? Set the no. Don't go. Those don't matter. It's all on the bottom. So go all the way to the left. Oh, haha. Even further. Yeah. That should work. Does it? Oh, pause. Okay. All right. Oh, that's very important. No, there should be sound there. It's not working. It's coming right from my computer. Yeah. Can you some computers you can change where the sound's coming from when you go to the setting.
Because it's in a HDMI.
Yeah. I don't. Max different. Sound. Yeah. So HDMI audio. All the way up. Okay. Let's try it really quickly. Exit out of the full screen. It might be a little confused. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now full screen. Oh. Can you just hit that little arrow thing?
What little arrow?
Right next to the play button? Will that send it to the beginning? Oh, okay, no. Oh, I mean, kinda. Close your eyes. Stop looking, everyone. Just spoilers. You don't want that. Let's move on to this fun. So I think you guys could have. I hear you. They're not looking. Yes. It's not, the arrow's not there yet. It's gonna make sure you really click it. Okay, it's good. Well, play it. We gotta make the audio.
happening?
We had it for a second there.
It was working before we switched it over to the audio. I stopped looking.
It should be downloaded.
I downloaded it in like 8 different places to make sure we could be able to do this.
The problem is it's
You were trying to download on here.
No, we stopped now. This file's on this appears on this screen.
Right. But where's the file that you were trying to download on the air?
Because if you export it, it should render it into.
Well, this should bring up.
Yeah.
what is happening.
I don't know why it's not supposed to be that fast.
It's not. It's way slower.
Are you guys hungry? You got some movies?
Yeah. Yes. Out and ready.
I don't know. Brooke, what is this over here?
The whole those
That
are just
is
files.
iMovie.
Those don't matter up there. Those are files that I moved into the video.
We should
the
have
video's
the
all on the
whole
bottom.
downloaded clip that I tried to send to you.
But this doesn't seem
So what if I go to?
I will help myself. Don't worry.
Where was that file though that you were trying to send? That should be on your computer, right?
Why is it doing that? There it is. We just need the sound. Oh, that's good. We just need the sound for it.
Yeah.
Well, it just said the screen. I'm not sure if that would do anything. Because it's just on iMovie. Huh.
Oh, that's full screen.
Yeah.
I've never understood Mac.
Neither have I. Why do I even have a Mac? Maybe, yeah. No, it's okay.
I'm really excited.
Because it's finally working. Okay.
We want to come out of not the MacBook.
We want them to be able to hear it.
We just need it to come out your headphone jack.
Are you over here? Yeah. I blame Apple for selling me the computer that doesn't have the right.
Congress wanted public ships
Yeah, at
used, and the only
least.
ships capable of the expedition were Navy ships. After long debate, on May 18, 1836, the act was passed ordering the exploring expedition to take place. There were many unforeseen issues, infighting, and impediments that delayed the expedition from taking place. And even with fun.
No one's plugging their ears. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, wonderful.
Okay, so you caught a couple quick glimpses of what our deliverable is. We put together a movie for you all to kind of run through our case study. And so we flashed forward to the courtroom scenes of our main character actually going through the court-martial process And from the court-martial process, you'll see flashbacks of what actually happened on the expedition.
On that note, it is an expedition that most people do not know about. Like they said, it was, as Sorge compares it to the original expedition of the Americas. So it was hard for us to find like photographic evidence or anything on that sort of note. So we have a little bit of photo footage in the beginning, which you'll see, but it is very scarce and limited. Just so you know, it is very not well heard of, probably because of the poor leadership that is displayed, but you'll be seeing more of that. So we can go ahead and let it roll.
In 1828, Congress wanted an expedition that would sail around the world that would yield economic, scientific, and military benefits for the new and growing country. The expedition would promote commerce and also offer protection to the heavy investment in the whaling and seal hunting industries. Congress wanted public ships used, and the only ships capable of the expedition were Navy ships. After long debate, on May 18, 1836, the act was passed ordering the exploring expedition to take place. There were many unforeseen issues, infighting, and impediments that delayed the expedition from taking place, and even with funding, it took 2 additional years for the expedition to be prepared. Command was finally given to Lieutenant WILX. Many senior officers resigned due to the decision, resulting in inexperienced officers filling command and leadership roles for the expedition. Many of these officers were trained in only sailing and warfare and were considerably inexperienced in scientific exploration. A large civilian scientific corps was cut down to 9 members by WILX, and WILX assigned the scientific duties to himself and the other officers who were very inexperienced. WILX primarily knew surveying, but took over all scientific functions. The 6 ships involved with the expedition were the USS Vincennes, the USS Peacock, USS Porpoise, USS Relief, USS Flying Fish, and the USS Seagull. On August 18, 1838, the exploring expedition set sail. The expedition first went down to Rio de Janeiro and surveyed shoals of latitude 10 degrees south and between 8 to 22 degrees south. The expedition crew remained in Rio de Janeiro until January 6, 1839 for repairs, exploring, and provisioning. The crews then visited Tierra del Fuego, Chile, and Peru. Unfortunately, due to a storm, the USS Seagull and its 15 members were lost at sea in May 1839. In December, the expedition sailed from Sydney to the Arctic. In July of 1840, while the expedition was exploring the uncharted and unexplored Fijian Islands, 2 of their crew members were murdered, which led to a massacre of the indigenous people. The expedition continued to explore and survey the west coast of both North and South America to include Strait of Juan de Fuca, Puget Sound, and the Columbia River. In July 1841, the USS Peacock was lost in the Columbia River with no loss of life. The expedition then went to San Francisco to survey the bay and its tributaries, which was used to produce a map of Upper California. They then returned to New York, June 10, 1842, and on their voyage back, they visited the Philippines, Singapore, Polynesia, and the Cape of Good Hope. Upon return, WILX was court-martialed and started a trial between the captain and his crew.
Hello everybody, I'm with the New York Daily Tribune, and today we are here covering the process, the court-martial process of U.S. Navy Lieutenant Charles WILX. Today is August 17th, 1842, and the court process is just about to begin. Shall we head on in?
Order in the court. The court is called to session on August 17th, 1842, calling the case of Crew v. WILX. Are both sides ready to proceed? I am, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
We will begin with opening statements from each opposing side. We will start with the prosecution, the crew.
The court, as the defendant, Charles Wilkes, has been charged with scandalous conduct such as exceeding punishment standards set by the law and lying. Evidence will show falsified logbook entries, lashing scars, and other brutal accounts taken by the crew against the leader, Charles Wilkes. He is also leads with a mindset of punishment first, inquire afterwards, which no man should do.
Thank you, Reynolds. You may be seated. We will now open the floor for the defendant to express their opening remarks.
Just didn't want to mess anything up down there. Turn it on.
Your Honor, by law, I am innocent until proven guilty. During this trial, you will see that, in fact, I was a great leader. You will see how well prepared I was for this expedition. I led my crew as any proud, qualified captain would. I am not guilty of mistreating my crew or making up any discoveries. Why would I do that?
I'm gonna rewind it a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna try to play.
Order in the court. The court is called to session on August 17th, 1842, calling the case of Crew v. Wilkes. Are both sides ready to proceed? I am, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
We will begin with opening statements from each opposing side. We will start with the prosecution, the crew.
The court, as the defendant, Charles Wilkes, has been charged with scandalous conduct such as exceeding punishment standards set by the law and lying. Evidence will show falsified logbook entries, lashing scars, and other brutal accounts taken by the crew against the leader, Charles Wilkes. He is also leads with a mindset of punishment first, inquire afterwards, which no man should do.
Thank you, Reynolds. You may be seated. We will now open the floor for the defendant to express their opening remarks.
Your Honor, by law, I am innocent until proven guilty. During this trial, you will see that, in fact, I was a great leader. You will see how well prepared I was for this expedition. I led my crew as any proud, qualified captain would. I am not guilty of mistreating my crew or making up any discoveries. Why would I do that?
We may now begin. The court calls to the stand the defendant, Wilkes. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
Well, it all started when
Come in.
Captain Wilkes here.
Come on in. Have a seat. Hello, Charles. So I know that you did not want to take part in the exploring expedition unless it is under your own terms. But the captain we had lined up fell ill, and he's no longer able to lead the expedition. The others that we had planned on relying on also backed down. We need you. Nathaniel Bowditch has mentioned your excellent survey work, and I have seen your work myself, and I've also been told you have some scientific equipment that would be beneficial for the expedition. Would you be willing to lead this expedition?
I've discussed this with my wife, Jane. There are many reasons why I should not accept this offer.
However, you will have nearly full control over the expedition. We can also work with you and the plan to make it on your terms if you agree to lead it. And we will work on raising you to the rank of captain.
I accept the offer.
Awesome. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, WILX. You may step down. On behalf of the prosecution, the crew, Charlie to the stand, please. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may begin.
A year before I was assigned to the expedition, I had received many lashings from WILX, which led to me resenting to work with him. I can still feel the sting on my back. I remember thinking I'd rather die than work for him again. When I saw him, it made me revengeful, like there was an evil building up inside of me. I even thought about how I would kill him, but then a flashback of my mother made me think of how I'm better than that. I've worked with WILX before and had reservations about working with him again. I especially knew it when Reynolds said to the crew that these little outbreaks of his were rather ominous for the future of our harmony of the squadron.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was.
Thank you, Charlie. You may step down. The court calls the defendant for counter remarks.
I do not remember it that way. As the voyage went on, I began to get migraines, and any disturbance made them worse. I often had to ask the sailmaker to start repairing the sails more quietly because it hurt my head. As I took time to rest, I worried about my rank. If I was not there to lead on deck, who was? I was exhausted and full of self-doubt. The leadership style I had used at George's Bank, where I tried to be everyone's friends, simply was not going to be effective anymore.
On behalf of the crew, Reynolds to the stand, please. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may begin.
In the case that is not already apparent, WILX felt that nothing else mattered other than victories, not even the well-being of his crew. During an incident in which a few sailors sampled some whiskey, they received 41 lashes each without a court-martial to allow it. The legal limit at the time was 12 lashings apiece. WILX then said it was reasonable as he had a no-tolerance policy, but he should have held a court-martial before doing so. This is all information I detailed in my personal journal that, by the way, we were not allowed to have. He made us all submit our journal to him for review, but I hid this one throughout the whole expedition. If WILX was a great leader that he claims to be, then why did so many men die under his command? If he was better at communicating, our men wouldn't have felt the need to go barter for food, resulting in their deaths. This lack of responsibility also triggered the events that started his mass murder of over 80 islanders.
Thank you, Reynolds. You may step down. I would like to call a recess. This has been a lot of information, and we will reconvene at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for a verdict and sentencing.
Wilkes, do you have anything to say? Do you have any comments?
No.
Okay, no Wilkes. Oh, Reynolds, come on. You got any statements?
No comment.
Please, come on, Reynolds. That was dramatic in there. How do you feel? What do you? All right, guys, that wraps up day one. Didn't get any good statements at the. Wait, is that Bowditch? Bowditch?
Can't believe I endorsed that man.
Hello again, good people of New York. Today is August 18th, and we are back for day 2 of this action-packed court hearing. Today is the last day of the trial, and it's getting real juicy. Wilkes, are you worried about the verdict?
No, I will not be guilty on the account of excessive punishment. I clearly had reason. Falsifying information? Simply, I didn't do it.
All right, okay, shall we go in?
Order in the court. The court is called into session August 18th, 1842. I have reached a verdict for the dispute Crew v. Wilkes. There has been a great amount of information to go over and many tragedies that we shall not forget. Wilkes, not only has it been stated that your leadership was questionable, but we have multiple reports from reliable sources of where you are overstepping, you are faking your rank, and flying the Commodore flag. On the charges brought forth to the defendant, the court finds Wilkes guilty by the court-martial of disobedience of orders, insubordination, and other specifications. You will be suspended for 3 years and be publicly reprimanded for the pain that you have caused. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this long dispute, and I'm glad we can now put it to rest, and court is adjourned.
All right. Well, that was dramatic. Let's see if I can grab some of them for some interviews. Hello, Judge. Thank you for coming in and talking with me today. I really appreciate that. That was quite the case you had there. How are you feeling about it?
I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. You might be surprised, but I get a lot of cases like this.
What do you mean you get a lot of cases like this? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, from my perspective, the typical man comes into the courtroom. His leadership style is absolutely horrible. So say you have a man coming in and their leadership style is very dominant rather than cautious when you think of it in disc analysis terms, and they don't do anything to work on themselves. When you think of the great man theory, you have these leaders that think they're just born with these traits, and they don't work on themselves. They just think they're a natural born leader, and that's how Wilkes was, and that's how every man that comes in is, that faces similar allegations such as Wilkes.
So you're saying that there are people out there that think they're born great and they don't have to do anything?
Yes, unfortunately, when you look at the theory, the great man theory, they think that they're born great and they don't have to do anything, and Wilkes wasn't doing anything to make himself a better leader.
You know, I did notice that in their reaction to everything that's happening. Wow, that's very interesting. That's given me a lot to think about. I appreciate that. So thank you, Judge, for your time. It was great being here with you.
Great being here with you.
Hello, Reynolds. Thank you for being here with me today. That was definitely something out there. I imagine that was really hard for you to have to go through again, considering all the negative allegations you had against Wilkes. Is there anything positive you think you could take away from this whole experience?
Yeah, when I first started being involved in the expedition, I thought Wilkes was going to be a good leader. He had a strong will about him and seemed very well put together, and he had some experience doing survey work before. But as soon as the expedition got started, I started to see the flaws in his leadership style. due to his lack of confidence, self-doubt, and all sorts of things, and it just kind of spiraled out of control. He took responsibility, or didn't take, or took responsibility of a lot of activities through the expedition without delegating it out to others, which made him overwork himself. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from this whole experience is don't be like Wilkes. He is a terrible leader and doesn't communicate well with his crew, and just fell apart and didn't know how to handle the stress and couldn't reach out for help because he isolated himself instead of working with his crew. He just told his crew what to do, and it just didn't work well.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine all that. Wow, that's insane. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Honestly, appreciate it. Well, good luck to you out there, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching. Are there any questions?
For this production?
We all worked freelance. Thank you for your question.
We have time for another couple questions from our audience.
Thanks. So first of all, great cinematography. I thought that was amazing, and great acting as well. You seem to capture it well in the video, and I get the sense that in cases like this where there's some question of the validity of the people in positions of authority, what is it that makes it interesting to learn about when things simply, on a voyage, they simply don't go as well as they should? And a few of you can answer this if you'd like.
Yeah, I would say for me, learning the difference between do you have the tools to lead the expedition versus can you lead people? I think I learned a lot. Milo playing Wilkes. Wilkes didn't necessarily have the people guidance leadership that he could have had, but he did have the tools and the experience to back it up. But at the end of the day, you really do need the people interpersonal skills to be able to lead people through an expedition so they really believe in you and really follow your leadership.
I mean, I agree completely. I think I related more to it personally from past experiences. I have been in a position where I don't want to delegate, and I understand how it's super easy to fall into as a leader. You just want to take everything under your own belt and do it yourself. That's what Wilkes did. And understandably, he's human too, and he had migraines and stress, and that because his crew already didn't like him for not delegating, that just kind of added onto it, where I imagine if he was a good leader and he had migraines, that wouldn't be something that we would know here today. So I think I kind of took away from it, like delegating and being kind of a leader for the team is more important. So hopefully next time I'm in a leadership position, I can utilize that.
I also thought that it was interesting that for like the voyage specifically, it was kind of the specific type of people he was leading. It showed like that was the problems that he had. But then as it kind of got into the story, it just showed that like general leadership, like failures kind of just show to be kind of killers of any type of, expedition or project or, and that really showed through. I thought that was interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great question, Nico. Another question from Professor Sorich?
No, kinda, but kind of a comment, because it's interesting to backdrop this against the Shackleton experience, right? Because Shackleton, he handpicked everybody. He picked the right people that he wanted for the job. 27 plus or 26 plus a stowaway go out, 26 plus a stowaway come back, right? And this one, 6 ships go out and 6 ships don't come back, and not everybody comes back. So I mean, I guess the question then is for anybody to answer is, where would you really fit that into a leadership category, like in that comparison and the contrasting between the two? Like, how would you try to explain that to somebody?
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult looking at both different case studies. You can handpick a leader, but it's really important for that leader to make sure they're handpicking their team. So in the Shackleton case, they were handpicking the men that were going out on the case. Wilkes didn't really get to know his crew. He was friends with some of them, but he didn't really adhere to to his audience. And I feel like I've been learning a lot about that. You really need to adhere to the people that you're leading, so you can lead them in a more efficient way, and there wasn't a whole lot of that on the X expedition.
All right, maybe one more question, and then we'll move on to individual.
Do you know if Bowditch published his books after or before the expedition?
Yeah, just to put that on a microphone for the people that might be on virtual, Bowditch was very well known before this was happening, and Bowditch did endorse Wilkes for the expedition. That was the scene when Bowditch was seen after the court hearing, kind of explaining that I can't believe I endorsed that man, putting his confidence into Wilkes as a leader, and then having that fail was really hard. So it definitely, Bowditch was known well before this expedition.
Thanks, everyone. Join me in a round of applause for X Expedition Group. Nice job, you guys. All right, so now we're going to move on to individual presentations. I think in the interest of time, we'll just power through. Let's see. Oh, it's not here? Okay.
This one goes back to your computer, remember?
Cool. So the first person up for our individual leadership reflections is
Sam.
Tom.
Before you do anything, is it just a video?
No. It is sound. I can turn my.
I'll just test it. I just turned the master down.
I'll turn mine down too.
I turned it all the way up for these guys. All right, is that good enough?
I think so.
All right.
Thanks, David. It's good enough for you, Tom? Okay. Shall we, is this good? Real karaoke? Are you going to preface this or just dive right in? Okay. Wait, sorry. Okay. All right. So all you have to do is. Oh, you want to take this one? Okay. There might be some feedback, so just make sure you're not like in line with that. Okay.
All right.
Ready?
Yeah. Take time to realize that your warmth is crashing down on me. Take time to realize that I am on your side. Didn't I tell you? But I can't spell it out for you. No, it's never gonna be that simple. No, I can't spell it out for you. If you just realize what I just realized, then we'd be perfect for each other and we'd never find another. Just realize what I just realized. We never have to wonder if we missed out on each other now. Take time to realize, oh, I'm on your side. Didn't I tell you. Take time to realize, oh, I'm on your side. Ooh. But I can't spell it out for you. No, it's never gonna be that simple. No, I can't spell it out for you. If you just realize what I just realized, then we'd be perfect for each other and we'll never find another. Just realize what I just realized. We never have to wonder if we missed out on each other now. It's not the same. No, it's never the same. If you don't feel it too. If you meet me halfway, if you would meet me halfway, it could be the same for you. If you just realize what I just realized, then we'd be perfect for each other and we'll never find another. Just realize what I just realized. We'd never have to wonder if we missed out on each other now. That's what I just realized, then we'd be perfect for each other and we'll never find another. Just realize what I just realized. We never have to wonder if we missed out on each other now. Missed out on each other now. Missed out on each other now.
Does anyone have questions?
I got the question. Sure. All right. So I mean, great. Now tell us about it. Why is this song? What does that mean to like leadership or leadership for you or leadership style? I mean, what screams leadership about this? I mean, great job singing. I'm impressed.
So the question is, how does this relate to leadership? And I think it really relates to leadership just due to originally the thought process behind leadership for myself was really conformed to one singular definition. And over this class period and having this time to meet with everybody and see their own different opinions, it's become more of this kind of fluid type of thing, since I'm realizing on a day-to-day basis how everything is different for every other person. So the definition for leadership over time in this class has really changed, and this song really relates to it just because in the song, as it's mentioned, the girl actually realizes everything in the end, and the guy that she wants has yet to do so. And I feel like in this situation, the class being the girl, that it already has everything realized for leadership, and I'm still trying to figure it out. That's how it really relates to leadership.
All right. Next up, Courtney, you already know it's you. All right, come on up. Hold on, I can get rid of this. Unless you want to do some karaoke too. Okay. I'm just gonna put this up. Okay, take it away. Oh yes. Oh yeah. We talked about it. Did you put it up here? You want to just scroll down, or I can scroll down to the photos?
Hi, everybody. My presentation is going to be a lot less musical, just fair warning. Okay, so for my project, I wrote a paper about my summer of bad luck, as I have dubbed it. Time being in a leadership position, and it was a very big learning opportunity for me. So I'm just going to share some pictures, which are kind of the highlights and lowlights of the summer. So this first one is a photo of me learning from the past mate on the vessel and the former captain. They were showing me how to toss one of the dock lines, and it at first started as a learning experience and then quickly turned into a competition between all three of us. And this 75-year-old captain absolutely demolished both us 20-year-olds at throwing dock lines, which was the first learning opportunity of the summer, was to really take note from the old captain and realize that he is just an absolute wealth of knowledge that I could learn from. Let's see. So this was the first kind of disaster of the summer. So pretty much the boat I worked on is the one that is at the dock over there. It's called the American Eagle. But this boat that is in the water right here is called the Schooner Heritage, and I worked on there the summer before, so I was fairly familiar with the captains and the crew on there. And this spring, so both our boats dock in a shipyard, and this spring we were helping to haul out Heritage so she could have her annual hull inspection, and the railway that hauls out the boat broke. So this 130-foot schooner, which was a good 40, 50 feet out of the water up on the railway, went plummeting back into the ocean at a very rapid pace. And I had to quickly learn how to get my crew into our small boats and go help assess the damage and make sure the other crew of this vessel were safe, because their captains were not on board at the time. And my captain wasn't on board at the time, so as the first mate, it was kind of my job to get everyone into gear, drop all our work, and go assess the damage and try to help get this boat back to its dock before it broke free of the rail car here. So that was kind of the first ominous part of the season. This also happened on Friday the 13th. Not saying I'm superstitious, but a little stitious. So this was another very large disaster of the summer that kind of came out of nowhere. So as you can see here, the boat I work on is the one that has the hole through the sail. So this was right after a big race day where it's called the Great Schooner Race. So there's about 12 to 15 of these huge schooners that all get together in Penobscot Bay during the summer, and we have a big race that starts in Rockland, goes out around an island, comes back to Rockland. And we had been anchored for probably 15, 20 minutes before this happened, and another large vessel came within probably 20 feet of us, which when you have 230-foot schooners, that's not a lot of wiggle room. And they tried to tack, and when they tried to tack, their headsails backed, which means they were now getting blown on top of us, and they steered right into us, and my crew and I were out on the very end of the bow, furling sails, and thankfully our captain knew exactly what to do in this instance as we saw this other huge schooner coming down onto us, and our captain ran back to the wheel, put the throttle in the corner, and was able to kind of spin us just enough so that the bow of the other boat didn't go in between our masts, which would have demasted us, and that could have been absolutely horrible. But with the quick thinking of our captain, and I had to kind of get our crew into position to get our paying guests out of the way of this other boat crashing into us, we were able to keep everyone safe. Unfortunately, the boat did take a lot of damage. This was just some of the damage that we had to deal with that night. And yeah, so throughout the summer, we had a lot of different things break underway, so we had to kind of go and scavenge around different harbors to find bits and pieces that we could fix boat parts with. And basically throughout this whole summer, I really learned from the crew and the captains how to be a leader and how to kind of take disasters as they come and make the best of them when you have paying customers aboard. So yeah, this was me and my crew, and that's it. Questions? No?
Probably have time for one question.
Oh.
Hello. Oh, cool. So that's a pretty big gash in the mainsail. How did you take part in kind of like repairing your vessel and like, you know, maintaining your composure through like staring disaster right in the face?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I took like the DISC test, my results came back as like a very relationship based and very cautious leadership kind of form. That was kind of not an option to have this summer during some of these disasters. There was just kind of a little piece in my mind that clicked when you can like obviously see something's about to happen. And my main focus during these situations was to just get people out of the way, make sure everyone's safe, and then kind of assess the damage of the vessel. It's just really hard when you have paying customers on board where you have to, like, you're liable for them, so that has to be your first priority. So that was definitely something I had to learn. Yeah.
If you have follow-up questions for one another, ask them during the gallery. We are gonna keep moving through here. All right, so next up, we have Sam. And that's not it. All right, look good?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, take it away.
Okay, here we go. All right, so I wrote a paper, and this is kind of just describing what I talked about in the paper. So I mainly took this class to, you know, become more employable and to become a better leader. And working on small vessels and in the VOT program, I really want to be a good captain in the future. And I've seen multiple different captains throughout my life in my work experience, and this next slide is going to show who I imagined, like who I've seen in the past. I haven't worked with many. I haven't worked with all different kinds of leaders, but this is what I thought. I thought this would be the ideal leader if I could be that today before I started this class. I wanted to be a tough leader, someone who kind of led with an iron fist and just expected everyone else to follow them. That's just what I'd always seen, and I just followed. That's just the way it was supposed to be. A respectable person, someone that everyone looks up to because of all their past experiences and just their license. I mean, that's respect enough. That was respect enough in my eyes, and I would follow someone like that in any situation. And someone who's willing to make tough decisions, even though, like, when no one else wants to make it, it all comes down to the leader and the captain. Someone who leads alone, they don't need anyone else to help them. It's kind of just, they know what to do, and that's the reason they're the captain, and that's what makes them so good. It's because they can do it all on their own. And someone who could bring others together and lead them, make a good crew, have everyone follow him, and just get stuff done. And then here's what I've learned, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about each one of these. But I learned to be respectable. That is another one that continued on from what I thought in the beginning. Someone who listens to others, leads by example, ability to lead in high-stress situations, and to make a good relationship with the crew. So the first is respectable. And I think that we all know that in order to follow someone, you need to have respect for them. And in the beginning, I thought that this would just automatically come to me when I became a captain. It's just what I had thought, and in reality, there's so much more to it. You need to gain the respect from everyone through your actions, through, you know, completing tasks well, and it does not come immediately. It must be earned. someone who listens. So previously I talked about leading alone and making decisions all on your own. And in reality, it's nothing like that. You should be able to take other people's ideas into consideration, but you should also be able to determine when to listen to others. There's certain situations where your idea might have been best, but you still want to listen to others to get a better outlook on the situation. So even if you don't take their ideas, then you know that you have all these other thoughts in your mind, and it gives you a new outlook. It leads by example. You always want to strive for perfection. I've worked with a couple different captains. Some may just do the bare minimum, and the crew will do the bare minimum because they don't want to do any more than they have to. But if you strive for perfection with every job, then your crew will most likely do the same. And it's easy to see whether or not a captain will strive for perfection, and you'll hear it from the other crew members as well. And then a captain who works alongside others, or a captain who is willing to come down and do the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And I feel like we've all seen at some point in our lives someone who is not willing to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And then when a leader will come down and do these things, because if a crew member is going to, if the captain isn't willing to do something well, or he's not willing to do some of these tasks like this, or even show people how to do it, then how is the crew member going to do it on their own? And why would they strive to do it well if the leader doesn't even care about it? I think high-stress situations, the ability to lead in high-stress situations is a huge one, because there are all kinds of times on the water when you're going to be in stressful situations, and your license is on the line, other people's license is on the line, so you need to make the right decision quickly. And the example from Dr. Preston Klein that we saw in class, with the situation in the clinic, he was able to respond even though someone else was frozen in their situation. So you got to be able to not only respond for yourself, but you got to respond for other people and get them to do exactly what you need them to in that moment. And I've seen that multiple times aboard. Just in my co-ops, I've seen that multiple times. So that's in 2 years, and I already know that's going to happen to me multiple times when I'm a captain in the future. And I want to be able to react to this, even though, as he said, it's human nature to freeze, and you cannot freeze as a captain. So, and that's not something that you can practice. That's just something that comes with time, and it's almost just in you at some point. You got to be able to respond to those situations. And then making a good relationship with your crew. If you don't have a good relationship, no one's going to want to follow you. You're not going to have any respect, and you're just going to be talked about as the captain that nobody likes. I'm sure everyone's heard of that, or anyone who's worked on boats has heard of that. This is the captain that nobody likes, nobody wants to work with. And if you make good relationships, people are going to be more willing to follow you. And if you have a crew that's going to listen to you no matter what, and you'll do good work, and you'll do safe work along with that. So, and then, like in the Shackleton expedition, if there's a crew member that isn't working well with others, you have to learn to work well with them. If they're not willing to work with you, you got to do the best you can to maintain a safe working environment. For conclusion, using all that I've learned during this class, it helped me analyze the captains that I've worked with in the past. And I think the more people I work with in the future, after taking this class, it'll give me a chance to analyze their leadership styles, and I can pick apart everyone that I've worked with and try to build myself into being the leader that I want to be in the future. And this class has helped me do that. And yeah, I got to understand that nobody's going to be the perfect leader, and it's just trying to do the best that I can do. And that's just going to make me the best captain, is always striving to do better as a leader. Yeah. That's my presentation. I hope so.
Does anyone have one question for Sam? Okay, let's move on. Nice job.
All right, so leading the way you want to be treated. So it's like, I mean, that's a corny quote, but so this presentation is about how my thoughts on leadership have changed throughout the semester. So throughout the semester, my ideas on leadership have changed drastically. Listening to all the different public speakers, leaders, and completing group activities have had a positive effect on my thoughts and especially who I am now. Specifically, I mean, it was interesting. Dr. Preston Klein has really sparked my ideas on leadership and taught me how important it is to have the ability to lead during high-risk situations. In the beginning, I really never thought that this was something to worry about and how good it could be. Outside of the classroom, I've really been looking into other leaders that also have strong leadership characteristics, and Jocko Willink is a great one. Why is leadership important? I mean, there's not really a true answer to this. Everybody may think different things about it, but I think it's important because strong abilities in a team bring out the best of everyone and motivates everybody. Like without a leader, it might be unorganized. There may be different, I personally believe a proper leader roughly holds the subordination of ego and takes ownership of everything that happens under their watch. So in the beginning of the semester, I mean, I kind of compared it to the ABCs. Like, this is the first step of learning. I thought it was all about just being full of courage, being respectable, knowledgeable, having great skills, and organized was what I thought a proper leader should be. But throughout the semester, it's really changed. So during the first quarter of the semester, it kind of changed. I mean, knowledgeable stayed, but tough. Like Sam said, I mean, a tough one that has iron fist, you know, a tough leader could really hold their leadership skills. Being respectable is probably another one that holds through, but an extrovert. So like I thought that's somebody that could go out and tell everybody what to do and not really just stay and keep everything to themselves. In the middle of the semester, I mean, this is about where Dr. Preston Klein has really sparked my ideas. And I thought of reaction timing. Reaction timing was a pretty good one, knowing when to react and when to lead. I mean, high risk, low amount of time was one of the thoughts, well, one of the points that he brought up. Knowledgeable state, again, being trustworthy. So when somebody higher up has like the trust to give you a task and understand that you will actually go through with it without checking up on you. Third quarter of the semester, trustworthy state on this one, humbleness. So humbleness was just staying quiet. You don't have to tell everybody what you have done, what you have accomplished. It's just keep it to yourself and you'll be a great leader. Composure is another one with it. And everything else stayed throughout. Towards the end of the semester, I really brought up a bunch of points that really brought up my characteristics for leadership. So trustworthy, humbleness, reaction timing, decision-making is a new one. Decision-making is like when knowing to be decisive. You can't just keep changing your mind on stuff. When you choose like a route, when you're a captain, you just need to choose one. You can't switch midway. Never give up. So like Shackleton's experience, he didn't just let the ship sink and everybody dies. He fought through everything and found a solution. And discipline, ownership. Leaders that inspire me. Dr. Preston Klein was one of the first ones that actually made me look into everything else. And then I started looking into Jocko Willink books, Jordan Peterson podcasts. Robert O'Neill has some good books. And of course, the professors. These are some helpful podcasts and articles that I found. And that's a leader who I aspire to be.
I mean, I look at this, I look at where you were at the beginning of the class, and I look at this presentation, and, you know, I have an idea in my mind, like, how much you really have grown and developed this whole thought of leadership. I mean, scale of like 1 to 10, where do you think you did? I mean, how much has this really impacted your viewpoint on leadership?
I'd say like definite 10. I mean, I really never thought it was this much going into leadership. I didn't know that there were other leaders that have inspirational like podcasts and books. So I really put that all together, and like it really changed me.
Yeah, and I just say I've seen the change in you. I really have. You know, in some of the discussions that we had off, you know, in class and whatever else, you can tell that this class, I think, has really impacted you, and it's good to see.
Definitely.
Round of applause. Okay, next up, we have Aiden, PowerPoint. So this will be our final verbal presentation, and then we will transition to the gallery. All right, does that look good? Yeah. Adjust this to your. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So in talking about leadership, I kind of wanted to do kind of a journey through my life. And so I kind of put my thoughts into this virtual house that my Bitmoji lives in to kind of talk about the different aspects of leadership throughout my life. So without further ado. So this is kind of my living room where I just kind of, you know, put all my thoughts together. And so first, we will kind of look at how I defined leadership for myself. So how I originally kind of see leadership is being the art of guiding a large or small group of people to achieve a goal. And I see it more of an art because it's not black and white with leadership versus a follower. There's a lot of kind of interchanging aspects of that and adapting aspects of that that really go into leadership. And so looking at my leadership style, I look at it as being developed through my life experiences and has a focus in both servant leadership and adaptive leadership styles. And so in developing my servant leadership style, I do a lot of putting others first, helping them out with what they need, and help them learn and grow in whatever they're working towards. I also, going along with that, value educating others and instructing others, because if you're not helping others, it kind of defeats the purpose of leadership. And with that, too, I find the best way to fully understand something is to help educate others, because if you're able to put what you're trying to achieve and teach that to someone else, for like trying to teach new skills or whatnot, it furthers your understanding of your skills, which makes you a better leader in the long run. And so kind of talking about the servant leadership, it's very much a serve to lead kind of a premise, putting emphasis on the mission and the team before oneself, and then creating an environment where everyone can flourish and succeed. And it also empowers us to lead humbly from whatever our position or situation. It's not so much kind of like a dictatorship. It's just everyone is working together. And you might have a dedicated leader, but everyone's able to work together to achieve the goals. And then the next part of my leadership style, being the adaptive side, really stemmed from my experience in EMS, because in those situations, everything is changing. The same thing never happens twice. So everything, you just got to be able to think on your feet and adapt to different situations. And so from that, we'll kind of discuss that in a different slide. So going back to my living room, we'll go to kind of how my leadership developed. So beforehand, I started out my leadership journey in Boy Scouts, where I started out as more of a follower, learning from the older scouts, the other leaders within the different units that I was a part of. And from there, I then grew and then eventually became a leader myself in those units in both Sea Scouts and Boy Scouts, where I was then leading different programs, various trips on sailboats for the weekend, camping trips, that kind of thing. And then in my later years of Scouts, right before I left the organization, I was doing much more of a educational emphasis, using the EDGE message of educate, guide, enable, or educate, demonstrate, guide, and enable, which again leads to the more of the helping others rather than just taking all the credit. And then once I left Scouts, I then became a part of the Manassas Rescue Squad, where I was then able to develop the second half of my leadership qualities through those experiences. And then we jump forward to, during this class, I had more of a narrow mind of what leadership meant, but through the different discussions that we had and various projects and speakers that we had, it definitely broadened to a bigger scope of leadership, that it's not just one thing, it's a broad array of various aspects and characteristics of leadership that really support those in different organizations or projects or whatnot. Afterwards, I want to use what I learned in the class to further my goals, as well as graduate with just a great understanding of leadership, so that when I then step into, either if I'm a mate on a vessel and eventually a captain, or if I'm able to go into the Coast Guard, I'll be able to use these skills to further develop myself, but then also help those around me. And then going beyond this class, again, is just continuing all of the stuff the foundation that I started here, and then just work upon that and really start to make an impact on the world around me. So in talking about more of my adaptive leadership style, it really stemmed from my time in the rescue squad. And this is a big part of the past couple years of my life, and has really made a positive impact on me. And so once I became a member of the rescue squad, I eventually became an EMT in my senior year in high school. And then once I was able to get that license, I then trained to become a fully released medical provider. So I went through a field training program, and then once I finished that up, I was able to then be in charge of patient care. And typically, I had a crew of anywhere between 2 to 4 people on our crew, but then on other more serious incidences, we would have additional support from fire companies and other medical units. And so it would go from 2 to 3 to could be upwards of 10 people that we'd have to manage through the incident. And in these situations, a lot of times calls started out as a basic type of a call, and then they would stem into a more serious matter. And when that happens, I would be on scene first. We'd start doing our patient care and realize, hey, this is something that we can't really handle unless we get more resources. And so once we got those resources on scene, I would go from more of a taking leadership role to then jumping back into the back seat and letting the more qualified people take over. And really having that ability to jump between follower and leader, I think, is a good thing to recognize sometimes, and understand that you're not always going to be the leader. You have to realize when others need to step in. Whether you're not trained enough, not comfortable, having that recognition will make you a strong leader. And then another key part that I saw in my experiences is when you're working with the small teams, having kind of a unique standardization for that team, I think is critical, because it really helps with communication. And without communication, you're just not going to be able to work effectively. And if the organization, like every department, has their own protocols for how to handle situations, and everyone needs to fully understand those protocols, because things are happening at the same time. There's 20 different things happening. You might be doing IV, you might be doing trauma bandages, applications, tourniquets, might be getting other supplies like the stretcher, or various transportation equipment to help move the patient from one place to another. There's a lot of things that you have to manage, and having that unique kind of standardization between the team really helps with effective communication, and it's very adaptive as it sets the standards, but no call is going to be able to fit into those protocols or standards, so being able to adapt is key. And then going into more of the recent time here at MMA, being on vessels for the past 2 summers, I've been able to see a lot of good leadership characteristics as well as negative characteristics. And so we'll jump into, first we'll start with the bad. So this past summer, I did a co-op, and the captain I was assigned, was very similar to Captain Charles WILX from the U.S. exploring expedition. Both of them seemed fairly insecure. They had some knowledge, but they not to the extent that made them feel comfortable in a leadership position. But they also didn't really take responsibility. They just kind of made, if something happened, they wouldn't take ownership of it. They would just say, oh, it's this person's fault, or it was this person's fault, or that person's fault. They just didn't accept that they were the captain, and they didn't want to take responsibility for the things that happened poorly. Another thing that I saw between the two was arrogance, which I think stems from being insecure. They're trying to make themselves feel like they're a good leader, when in reality it's really coming off in a negative way, which negatively impacts the crew. And then going along with that too is over-controlling. They don't know when to step back. They're just going to work themselves and work their crew without being able to see, hey, this is not okay and this is making a negative impact. But then also reacting emotionally when things do go wrong. WILX did this as well. If something happened that he didn't like, he just went ahead and gave lashings to his crew without taking a deep breath and seeing, how can I handle this in a better manner? But putting all the negative stuff aside, going to the good leadership experience, one of the main field training officers I had was the president of my rescue squad, but he was also my crew leader. And I saw a lot of similarities between him and the crew of the XX as well as Reynolds. Mainly because I saw a lot of patience. He was in his 60s or 70s when I started training with him. And so he had a lot of patience from his own personal experience, and having a leader that was patient with me in my learning process was very helpful. And I definitely work on my patience in various aspects, because you have to be patient with others to fully understand their point of view. Also, their experience. If you put the crew of the XX together, all of them had a lot of experience. They just had a poor leader that didn't draw on this experience to make it a positive expedition. Instead, they came back and there was a court-martial rather than celebration. And with that experience, my crew leader was able to kind of teach me through his experience, which definitely helped develop my skills as a medical provider. Also, the ability to mentor really stuck out to me with my training officer, because if you're not able to or not willing to take the time to educate others and mentor them, it's just not going to lead to a very long-lasting kind of a leadership role. And then also open to discussion and constructive conversations. This one I think is very important, because after situations occur, whether good or bad, being able to have a sit-down discussion and discussing what went right, what went wrong, what could be improved, I think is very beneficial. A lot of times we would have calls that didn't go well, and having these discussions helped us improve our protocols so that we could then provide better patient care for others in the future. But then also seeing what went right is good, because then we can use those experiences and communicate those through the organization. Say, hey, this went good for us, and how can we kind of spread this to other crews to help them improve their patient care as well. And I think that might be it. Kind of just a quick run through of all my leadership. So, anyone have any questions?
No? There you go. Just have to press the mute button again. Just kind of press it. Yep. Until it turns green, yeah. Here, I got it. Oh, you are. It's red and orange. So I mean, it's orange and green. So there you go.
All right. This is going to be the abridged version of the essay I wrote. So just give me like 2 minutes and we'll try to break it down. So I'm going to talk, I guess we'll start at the beginning here. And that's going to be me before we got to class. And me before we got to class thought that leadership for myself was going to involve only the relationships I had with others. And in that sense, I mean, I thought that if I could have good one-on-one relationships with the other people in my group, then they would be motivated to either follow me or act the way that I did just because either they liked me or they felt like I was a responsible leader because they got to know me. And I don't think that's wrong, but now that I've been in this class, I think that's a little narrow-sighted, and I've tried to really broaden my perspectives a little bit. And just to give you a little more perspective, I'm in a pretty small program here at MMA, and as some of you might know, there's not a whole lot of different personalities when you're in the engineering department, right? So I'm going to be experiencing a couple people that are maybe not super different from each other. And that's good, but at the same time, this class was great for me because I was able to see, wow, there's all these sorts of people out here leading in their own ways, and that's great, and why don't I try to do that too? So after going through class, I think the most powerful thing that I had was just being able to see all of you leading in the ways you do, and I appreciate that. So that led me to my conclusion, which really is just, hey, I've got a lot to work on, and I'm going to try to do that in the future. And that's to kind of take a step past just having relationships, right? So that's good. One thing about me is I'm really interested in getting to know people on a one-to-one basis. So I want to keep that strength, right, because I want to play to my strengths as a leader. But like I said, I want to take that a step further. And that means, just like Shackleton did, I want to make sure that I can lead by knowing who's in my group well because I've gotten those one-to-one relationships with them. So just for example, right, he was in a tent with other people that he knew weren't going to do well unless he was with them. That's not really something he was going to be able to do unless he had actually gotten to know them and understood, oh, that's how these people are, that's how they're going to operate. So I'm going to try to do something similar in my future, and we'll see how it goes. But I think the biggest thing that I can take away from this essay I wrote that someone over here is going to read, I hope you enjoy it, is I've still got a lot to learn, but I learned a lot from the people in this class, and I appreciate you exposing me to new leadership styles that I may not have seen in my program. So once again, I appreciate you, and that is the shortest version of my essay that I could come up with. So thank you.
Okay, with that, we will conclude our live stream and this round of verbal presentations. Thank you, everyone who's presented. Thanks to Brian Wolf, who set up the live stream. What we'll do now is transition to our gallery. And if anyone has a little overview of their gallery that they want to kind of present to all of us, now is a good time to do it. Otherwise, come on up, Molly.